Yo, what's good, everybody? It's me, Don Weeb, here with part 1 for a brand new series, What If Deku Had Rewind? Now, you guys might be wondering what Rewind is, and if you don't know what it is, if you haven't watched Season 4 of My Hero Academia, it is actually Eri-chan's quirk, which basically allows her to turn back time on living objects, or fast forward, and basically she can't control it, but it's what Deku had her use to help him defeat overall. Spoilers for that in Season 4. Anyway, let's just get right into this part for this new series. Izuku was born with a strange power, as when he was born his mother had been very proud to have him, as well as his father, who left for milk. Deku had a green horn in his head that had grew ever since he was a young child, and had become much larger as he had approached the age of 4 years old, when children were known to have their quirks grow, as well as begin to develop into a full-blown quirk. Deku wasn't bullied by Bakugo and his friends as a child because they already had deducted that he'd have some sort of quirk just because humans don't generally have horns. His quirk would violently awaken, however, on January 13th, around 8 years before he'd be going to middle school, before he goes into UA. Deku's quirk would awaken. As Deku is currently rushed away from the other students, Deku's power would awaken as his green horn would begin to grow. What's happening, he would think, as suddenly electricity began to spark off his horn as he falls over, touching a small bug, it instantly disappearing. This is when Deku would be taken to the doctor without being touched, as Izuku Midoriya didn't want to hurt his mom, of course. As Izuku finally makes it to the doctor's office, the doctor would run some tests as he had now calmed down, deducing that Deku has a very special power that allows him to rewind all living objects. This power is extremely unique and is very rare to find. The doctor would recommend to Deku to not use his quirk as much as possible. However, Deku, who always wanted to be a hero, would train his quirk as soon as he got out of the doctor's office. He would tell his mom he's going outside to go play with Bakugo and his friends, when in reality he'd go to the back of the forest where he and Bakugo would explore, as he heard that his quirk, called Rewind, has the ability to touch and change life. So if I can do that, then Deku would think, as he holds his hand onto a tree, he thinks about All Might, his favorite hero, and how he had saved all those people. If I could do that, then... As Deku closes his eyes, he would focus on rewinding the tree back to a sapling, as he then turns back an imaginary clock in his head, spinning it quickly. Green lightning would flow off of the horn on the right side of his head as it grows longer. Just as he does this, Deku's eyes would light up green as he opens them, seeing the tree now become a young sapling. Deku would then touch the tree again as he then tells it to grow. The tree would then explode back to its original length, creating a large sound and reverberation of wind through the forest. That's it, Deku would think. As for the next few years, he would begin working on training his quirk to the highest degree as he can. Deku would have mastered his rewind quirk to a almost perfect T, as Deku being a smart and intelligent student, as well as a person who always wanted a quirk and to be a person who wanted to be a hero, he would train his quirk quite often. Deku was renowned in school, which caused Bakugo to have some sort of rivalry with him, as Bakugo was always the one who destroyed things with his explosion quirk, while Deku could rewind them. As Deku's rewind quirk would grow, he would quickly become adjusted to learning about a new power that he would be attaining very soon. As Deku's new abilities begin to start showing, Deku is now at the end of middle school, as he's preparing to take his entrance exam for UA. He's in training for a long time now, little bits at a time, but still, he's gaining much control over his quirk, and his mom doesn't even have to be afraid of him using it now, as he can use it on pretty much anything and control it whenever he needs to. As opposed to Eri, who would be born a few years after Deku, who has no control over her quirk after the trauma that had affected her due to it. Back to that later, though. As we see Deku now being a middle schooler, his horn's much longer now, as it looks more obtuse on his forehead, as having his quirk grow too. This is when we see the sludge monster running through the streets from All Might, as we see it about to pounce Deku. This kid could be a nice flush suit for me to get out of here. I didn't know he was in town, he would say, as he then tries to jump Deku. Immediately, as soon as he touches Deku's body, Deku would use his rewind quirk. As he uses rewind on the sludge villain would be rewinded as his body and his quirk would be rewinded back to a normal human. What? This man would appear, a man who looked nothing like this sludge monster. You took my quirk away. Damn you. Deku would hold his hand out and say that he can take much more than that if he tries to fight him, and that he's not one yet, but he's going to be a hero someday. Deku would show determination in his eyes, as we then see All Might appear, laughing as he tells this young man, having seen his ability, telling him that he did a great job. Deku would look up, asking what he means, when All Might would then appear as he's in awe. All Might! Is that you? As All Might would then now have come down, he would greet him as Izuku would introduce himself, mumbling, saying that his name is Izuku Midoriya. This is when Izuku would then, as he's touching the sludge monster guy, who's just a normal dude now, would turn into a baby. He would give the baby to All Might and say that he'll turn him back later, once they get to the police station, if that's alright. But Deku would say this as he smiles, with him shaking a little at the knees, having seen All Might. All Might would pat him on the back and ask if he wants anything, after taking down that villain for him. Deku would say he just would really like his autograph, as he holds out his notebook for him. All Might would laugh and say, of course, as he takes out this autograph, and would then give it back to him. Deku would then rewind the baby back to the adult dude, as they then put him into jail, having his quirk taken away. That's a pretty interesting power you have there, kid. Deku and All Might would have this conversation as they're walking away from the police station. You think so? Deku would ask All Might, as he's still nervous around him. All Might would tell him that he's actually been hoping to begin to work at the school UA here and was wondering if he'd be applying. Deku would nod eagerly, saying that he's actually going to be applying for the hero exam this year. And All Might would smile, saying he'll be eagerly watching, as now he's found another candidate for One for All. Deku continues to train until the final examinations are coming. A flashback as Deku's walking home to the day just earlier before the sludge monster incident. We see Deku taking notes as he's writing in class, with the teacher asking what they all want to be, with everyone wanting to be a hero, of course. Bakugo would laugh as he calls them all sidekicks, with Deku looking up, as they would ask who wants to go to UA. Bakugo and Deku would both raise their hands, with no one in class being surprised that either of them are going to. Deku having an extreme control over his powerful quirk, along with Bakugo. Bakugo, after class, would confront Deku and tell him that he's going to get a higher score on this nerd no matter what. He would then poke Deku in the chest and tell him he'll see him in the exam, as he then smiles as he runs off with his other friends. Deku would turn around as he smiles, saying he'll see Kacchan later, as he would then jump out the window, just like Kacchan would have said in the original. However, this time, just as he's falling, Deku would throw a seed down, as he uses rewind to create a great tree. Just as the tree catches him, he would then rewind the tree back to his seedling, as he then puts it back into his pocket. This was a handy trick he had learned from that incident in the forest years ago. Anyway, back to walking home. Deku would go home and just nothing would happen at this time yet. Many months would pass, as now the 6 months before the UA examination had passed, with Deku having trained his physical body just a little bit, but mostly working on his quirk. As Deku would now arrive at the UA examination, Deku would be ready, as now the starting bell begins, with him and Bakugo being in separate areas, unfortunately for the two of them. Ito would see Deku and ask him what his quirk is after seeing his horn, probably thinking it's some sort of monstrosity or some sort of mutation quirk, with Deku not saying that he'll see what it is. As they get into the examination, there'd be many robots. Dang, I can't rewind these, Deku would think, as he then rushes over towards one of the large robots. Take this. Deku would hold out a small seed again in his hand as he's about to smash into the robot. What's he doing? As Deku is throwing seeds into all the robots inside of their gears, he would then hold his hands together as some sort of green electricity would connect all of them. Rewind, he would say, as he then winds all of them back into trees, exploding almost 10 robots in one shot. Impressive, he can control and grow life? Interesting, Ito would think as he goes running around hitting more robots. After a long time of them fighting, All Might would see Deku fighting his way through and be impressed. As now, the 0-point robot would arrive. He would hear a scream. That girl. Deku would have a flashback again to earlier that day when he'd been walking in and had almost tripped over himself with Ochako saving him. I have to save her no matter what. As Deku runs forward, he puts his hand into his pockets as he grabs all of the seeds he had brought with in order to take out down the examination. This is when the giant 0-point robot's about to crush Uraraka. Deku would scream, "Great forest tree!" as he then throws all the seeds directly in front of Uraraka as he jumps in front of her, protecting her. The giant foot's about to stomp the both of them when Uraraka is shocked. Suddenly, a ginormous tree, huge and hundreds of feet taller than skyscrapers, would begin to pierce through the robot as it stabs it through the chest. This humongous tree would then shrink back to normal as the robot falls over, Deku picking up all the seeds that he had dropped and putting them back in his pocket. The robot having been completely destroyed, On would have made up his mind. This kid has got some potential, and with One For All, what else could he do with that rewind quirk of his? Deku would help Uraraka up and thank her for helping him earlier that day, and now they're even as he smiles. Uraraka would laugh as she asked him what that was, and Deku would say it's his quirk, Rewind. Deku and Uraraka would quickly become friends, as the two then head off to go and destroy more monsters and more robots. Deku would finish in first, beating Bakugo with a score of 30 points higher after defeating that big robot, getting 60 villain points, as well as another 40 hero points for saving Uraraka from the big monster. Deku would be very proud of himself, as he would see that Uraraka had actually gone in too. That must be who that girl was who I'd saved, and who had saved me, he would think, as he then heads home smiling. Just as he's heading home from the exam, preparing to leave the school, All Might would confront him as he prepares to ask him something. Young Midoriya, I need to have a conversation with you in private, as I want to talk to you about something. As Deku and All Might would be pulled into a separate room, All Might would begin to have a conversation with Deku and explain to him something. My power is known as One For All, the power that's been passed on for generations, 9 times in fact, at this very day, for you to be the 9th user. What are you talking about? Deku would say, as All Might would smile, saying that, I want you to be the next user of One For All, to inherit my power. Deku would be shocked as he asked what he means, when All Might would say if he takes his DNA, then he will inherit One For All, which will give him enough strength to be equal or even more powerful than I am. Deku would be surprised, as he had never thought about this before and had been thinking about what All Might's quirk could be, but he'd always assumed it had been super strength or super speed or some sort of amplification quirk. Then, you sure you want to give it to me? I'm just a newbie. You could give it to someone else. There's no way I'm worthy of something like that. All Might would laugh as he says that there's no one but you, and that you are my first choice, and it's all up to you. What do you say, kid? This is when Deku would smile, as he says that he accepts, and that he accepts All Might's power. All Might would give him a thumbs up as he says they need to get training immediately if they want to give him his quirk before school starts. For the next 2 weeks before the acceptance letters were sent out, All Might and Deku would be doing extreme training at Kamina Beach. For 2 weeks straight, they'd be doing intense training, drinking protein shakes, as Deku's body is much stronger than it was without a quirk, as bodies with quirks are much more powerful, so it doesn't take him too much time to get ready for One For All to accept it. Deku would then take in All Might's hair as he eats it and takes the power of One For All with him. This new change that he would experience, though, in his quirk, All Might would explain to him that One For All doesn't just amplify your physical abilities, it also gives you more power on any quirks that you happen to possess already, which means your rewind quirk will be even more amplified with some sort of ability. Deku would try using his seed trick as he tries to create a tree, and it goes much faster than he had actually anticipated, with him activating maybe One For All just a bit into his quirk. What the? It's so strong! Deku hasn't even been using 1% on his quirk because his body can't use 100% yet. However, Deku is getting the hang of it as he continues working on this. As they walk away, however, little did they know at the beach, before they'd finished clearing all the trash, something that Izuku had done before they left without them noticing. An old rusty refrigerator, as they'd walked away, began to return to its former self, as a brand new, white, clean, shiny refrigerator is that now standing there. That's right, Deku's rewind quirk with One For All inhabiting it as well gives him the ability to alter and control and rewind life and non-living things, which gives Deku basically control over time of objects. Deku wouldn't know about this yet, however, as he would then be ready for the acceptance, hoping that he would get in. Deku would now accept his acceptance as the letter comes to him, congratulating young Midoriya on getting into UA. The first day would arrive, as his mom is so proud of him and would give him that hero suit he had designed a long time ago. And as Deku would then head to school for the first time, he'd see the giant doors, thinking why it's so big, when he opens the door and sees his classmates inside. It's that nice girl from before, he would think. As Ochaka comes running from behind him, he would turn around and see her as she then asks if his name's Deku, right? And Deku would then say that that's actually something Bakugo calls him as a nickname. Ochako would say she likes it, and she's going to call him Deku too. With Ida welcoming Deku to the class, saying that what he had done with that 0-point robot was extremely impressive. Bakugo won't be that surprised, though, as Deku had high control over his quirk. However, he doesn't know about Deku's new ability. As Deku would then sit down for class, Aizawa would then roll into the classroom in his sleeping bag, asking if they were there to socialize or if they were there to train to become heroes. All the students in Class 1A would then ask Aizawa-sensei if they're going to the welcoming for the freshman class. He would say that's lame, as they're going to go on and do a physical test of their strengths and their quirks. Deku would be worried about this, as his quirk is much more used for tactical attacks rather than speed or power. He was worried, but then he remembered that he had One for All. I just have to use One for All then. I know I can do this. As Deku would then get down to the area below, now wearing the gym PE outfits, they get ready for the exam. The 50-meter dash. Ido would then easily storm this. However, Deku isn't willing to put it all in yet, as he doesn't know how much of One for All he can actually use. Deku still thinks of One for All as not something a part of him, and so he doesn't have full mastery over it yet. So no full cowling. This is when, after some average stunts, suddenly the weight grip test would begin. He'd realize how he can do this, as he then realizes that wood branches have incredible strength. He had placed 2 seeds of a tree, just as he had been using before for the cup several times, as he then creates tree branches to help him with his grip strength and clutch around as he clutches it, giving him a high PSI, as now he has a high grip strength, which is his highest score so far. His next highest thing would be the long jump, as he creates a large tree which would spring him all the way to the end faster than anyone else, giving him a higher long jump than even Froppy. Now it was time for the ball throw, as he was deciding this is when he's going to show off One for All. As he then holds the ball, he would then channel Rewind as his horn begins to shoot electricity all around him. He would channel One for All into the very tip of his pinky, as he knows from All Might that it can damage his body. However, Deku can rewind living things. As he charges all of One for All into his right arm, he's going to go all out. Aizawa would narrow his eyes as he sees what's going on, and however he doesn't as he's activating his quirk to turn off Deku's quirk, Deku would then stop, asking Aizawa-sensei why he stopped him. Aizawa would warn him about damaging his body and seeing what kind of power he's using. Baku would be confused by this remark, but Deku would understand what he's saying. He tells Aizawa that he's got this, and as he takes the ball, he tells him he's ready. He would then blow the whistle as Deku takes the ball and charges all of One for All into his right arm. He would then step forward as he then says, "Here we go, Detroit Smash!" He throws the ball with as hard of a force as he can and feels his right arm explode in pain. The skin is red now as he feels his entire arm shatter. Deku would then see as the ball goes flying, getting 1,000 meters, an even higher score than Baku had got. However, before anyone can notice, Deku would then take his other arm as he slams into his right arm and uses Rewind to a few seconds ago. As he rewinds his arm back, now Deku has no damage from One for All, faster than anyone could notice. That was incredible, Baku would be thinking, but how? His quirk doesn't have that kind of power. It's more for tactful uses rather than just raw strength. What was that? Deku would look over at Aizawa, who would nod as he walks back. Ochako would be impressed, not thinking he had that kind of physical strength. Little does everyone know, however, that he has All Might's power with him now, too. This is when Deku would realize something. What the? He'd turn around as all the class look up, seeing the baseball that he threw begin to wind backwards. What? He'd used Rewind on his right arm. The baseball was coming back to him. This is an inanimate object, though, he'd be thinking, as his eyes begin to shake, looking at the ball. As the ball comes flying towards him, he'd catch it out of midair, as he hands it to Aizawa-sensei, Aizawa being confused. Does this mean I can rewind objects? He'd be thinking as he has a flashback of All Might telling him about how One for All amplifies your quirk. Deku would walk away as he thinks about this, with him now thinking about his new life here at UA. If you guys want to see the next part for What If Deku Had Rewind, make sure to hit the like button, comment down below what you thought, and subscribe to the channel for more. I will see you guys later. Bye.